A story written by Moonlight Romance Library.
Chapter 1. The Gilded Key. The great hall reeked of desperation, masked by expensive perfume. Roderick stood at the dais' edge, watching another female approach with practiced grace. Her silk gown whispered against marble, each step calculated to display the curve of her hip, the arch of her neck. She'd rehearsed this. They always did. "My prince," her voice dripped honey. "I've waited seasons for this moment." His wolf snarled inside his chest, hackles raised against the lie. She hadn't waited for him. She'd waited for the crown that would rest on her head, for the power that hummed through these ancient stones, for the title that would elevate her above every female who'd sneered at her in the market. He'd seen her yesterday, shoving a servant girl against the kitchen wall hard enough to leave bruises. The girl's crime, moving too slowly with the breakfast tray. "Your devotion honors me," Roderick said, the words ash on his tongue. She smiled, triumph flickering in her eyes, and extended her wrist for the bonding trial. The ceremonial blade gleamed in torchlight as his father's advisor stepped forward, ready to draw the first drop of blood that would test their compatibility. Roderick's wolf recoiled so violently, he nearly staggered. No, not her, not this mockery. The rejection burned through his veins like liquid silver. The female gasped, her face draining of color as she felt it too. The fundamental wrongness, his wolf's absolute refusal to even consider the bond. I don't understand," her perfectly practiced composure cracked. "The seers said." "The seers were mistaken," Roderick's voice carried across the hall, final as a blade falling. "I'm sorry." She fled, silk skirts clutched in trembling hands, and Roderick heard the whispers start immediately. "That's the fourth one this moon. The seventh this season. What's wrong with the prince? Too particular. Too proud. Doesn't he know duty comes before desire?" He knew. Gods, he knew. Two more females waited in the ceremonial line, their expressions carefully arranged into masks of longing. Behind those masks, Roderick saw the calculation. The ambition, the same cruel glint he'd witnessed when they thought no one important was watching. Last week, one of them had laughed as her friends tormented a lower-ranked wolf for having the audacity to wear blue, her color, apparently. She'd stood there in the market square, arms crossed, smile wide, while they shredded the girl's dress and dignity in equal measure. Then she'd seen Roderick watching from the balcony above. Her expression had shifted instantly. Concern, compassion, a gentle hand on the victim's shoulder. She'd even offered her own shawl, voice trembling with manufactured kindness. The performance had been flawless. His wolf had wanted to vomit. "Perhaps we should conclude for tonight." His father's voice cut through the tension, gentle but firm. King Aldrich had seen the rigidity in his son's shoulders, the wild thing clawing beneath Roderick's skin. "The prince needs rest." The relief nearly buckled Roderick's knees. He escaped the moment protocol allowed, stone corridors blurring past as he made for the one place he could breathe, his father's private study, where honesty was still permitted between these walls. Aldrich found him there an hour later, standing at the window that overlooked the moonlit training grounds. "You can't keep doing this." His father's words held no anger, only weariness. "The council grows restless. The pack needs a Luna." "The pack needs a Luna who won't poison it from within." Roderick didn't turn from the window. "I'd rather rule alone than watch someone torture those beneath her while smiling sweetly at my side." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the crackling fire. "Your mother chose me," Aldrich said quietly. "Not the crown, not the territory, me. I was a second son, Roderick. I had nothing to offer but myself." He moved to stand beside his son. "I know what you're searching for. I understand why nothing else will do." Roderick's throat tightened. "Then let me go." "Go." "Beyond our borders, to another pack, another territory. Somewhere I'm not a prince, just a wolf. Let me find someone who sees me, not this." He gestured at the ceremonial robes, the crown on his brow, the weight of expectation pressing down like iron chains. Aldrich's expression shifted, concern warring with something that might have been hope. "The council will never agree. Your duty." My duty is to give this pack a Luna worth following. Roderick finally met his father's eyes. What good is a bond built on lies? She'll smile at you, father, and gut our people the moment your back is turned. I've watched it happen. I've seen who they really are. The king studied his son's face, reading the desperation carved into every line. The wolf in Aldrich recognized the wildness in Roderick's eyes, the look of a creature that would gnaw off its own leg to escape a trap. How long? Aldrich asked finally. Roderick's heart stuttered. What? How long do you need? Hope flared, fragile and fierce. A year, maybe less, just time to look, time to find something real. Aldrich exhaled slowly, the weight of kingship heavy in the sound. 6 months! That's all I can give you before the council demands answers. He gripped Roderick's shoulder. And when duty calls you home, son, you will come, with or without a mate. Do you understand? I understand. Then go. Aldrich's fingers tightened briefly, then released. Go find what I found, what every wolf deserves. Roderick left before dawn, carrying nothing but essentials and the desperate hope that somewhere beyond these golden walls, truth still existed. Chapter 2. New Beginnings. The cottage smelled of abandonment and rotting thatch. Roderick dropped his pack on the dirt floor, dust motes swirling in the shaft of afternoon light that sliced through the broken shutter. 5 territories behind him, 6 months ahead. The rough wool of his peasant tunic scratched against skin accustomed to silk, a constant reminder that Prince Roderick had died somewhere on the road between Iron Fang and Clearwater. Here he was just Roderick, a wolf without a pack, a nobody. His wolf settled for the first time in months. The Clearwater Alpha had granted him residence with barely concealed suspicion. Neutral wolves were rare, and rarer still were those who chose to settle rather than drift. But the cottage had been empty for years, slowly collapsing into the forest, and what harm could one lone wolf do? Roderick spent 3 days making the place livable. His hands, trained in swordplay and statecraft, learned the sting of splinters and the ache of honest labor. He patched the roof with branches and moss, scrubbed years of grime from the single window, repaired the crooked door that hung from rusted hinges. No servants appeared to do it for him. No one bowed as he passed. It was perfect. On the 4th day, hunger drove him to the village market. The crowd parted around him like water around stone, not with deference, but with wariness. Strange wolf, outsider, possibly dangerous. Mothers pulled children closer. Merchants watched him with narrowed eyes as he examined their goods with calloused hands that didn't quite match his threadbare clothes. He'd almost finished gathering provisions when awareness prickled down his spine. Someone was watching him, not with suspicion but with curiosity. Roderick turned slowly, and his breath caught. She stood 3 stalls away, a basket of herbs tucked against her hip. Auburn hair caught the sunlight, turning it to flame. But it was her expression that struck him, open, interested, entirely without guile. She met his gaze directly, no flirtation in her eyes, just genuine human curiosity about the stranger buying bread with fumbling unfamiliarity. Then she smiled. Not the practiced, calculated smile he'd endured in Iron Fang's great hall. This one reached her eyes, crinkling the corners, warm as summer rain. His wolf stirred, not with rejection, not with warning, with interest. She moved toward him with easy confidence, seeming not to notice the way the crowd shifted to accommodate her. "You're the wolf who took old Miriam's cottage." "I am." His voice came out rougher than intended. "Bold choice. That place hasn't been inhabitable since before I was born." She shifted her basket, studying him with frank assessment that somehow didn't feel intrusive. "I'm Brenda." "Roderick." "Well, Roderick, you're holding that bread wrong. Merchant Griss will charge you double if he thinks you don't know the difference between yesterday's loaf and this morning's." She plucked the bread from his hands, replaced it with another from the same basket. "This one, see how the crust still has flecks? Fresh." Heat crept up his neck. Prince of the Iron Fang, outsmarted by bread. Brenda's laugh bubbled out, bright and unrestrained. "Don't feel bad. He tries it on everyone. You're new." "Though, so he was definitely going to fleece you." She hesitated, then added, I could. If you'd like, I could show you around. Help you figure out Clearwater before the merchants steal you blind. Roderick's instinct was to refuse. He'd come here to be alone, to escape exactly this kind of attention. But something in her expression stopped him. No calculation, no hidden agenda. Just a woman offering kindness to a stranger who clearly needed it. I'd appreciate that, he said. Her smile widened. Good, come on then, and put down that fish. It's been sitting in the sun since dawn. The weeks that followed rewrote something fundamental in Roderick's understanding of the world. Brenda appeared at his cottage most mornings, usually with food she'd accidentally made too much of, and proceeded to drag him through Clearwater's rhythms with infectious enthusiasm. She showed him the best fishing spots, the trails that looped through old-growth forest, the clearing where wildflowers bloomed thick enough to wade through. She talked constantly about her family, her friends, the pack's gossip and small dramas. Her father bred horses. Her mother had ambitions of grandeur that Brenda found equally exasperating and endearing. Her childhood had been comfortable, cushioned by wealth but not corrupted by it. And she asked questions, real ones. Where had he come from? What had driven him to leave? What did he hope to find in Clearwater? Roderick answered with careful half-truths. He'd grown up in a large pack up north. Traditions there felt suffocating. He'd wanted to see if life could be different elsewhere. All true, none of it complete. Brenda never pushed for more. My friends think I'm insane, she said one afternoon, sitting beside him on the cottage steps while he sharpened a knife he'd traded for. Spending time with the poor drifter who can barely afford bread. Roderick's hand stilled on the whetstone. And what do you think? She tilted her head, sunlight catching in her hair. I think they're so busy looking at what you don't have, they can't see what you do. Which is? Kindness, intelligence, the way you actually listen when people talk instead of just waiting for your turn to speak. She bumped his shoulder with hers. Also, you're getting quite good at bread selection. His laugh surprised them both. Brenda grinned, clearly pleased with herself, and Roderick felt something warm unfurl in his chest. Not the violent rejection his wolf had thrown at every iron fang female. Something softer, richer. Something that felt dangerously like the beginning of everything he'd been searching for. Chapter 3, Roots and Revelations. 10 months dissolved like morning mist. Roderick had stopped counting days somewhere around the 3rd month, when Brenda had shown up at dawn with bread still warm from her mother's oven and announced they were going to the Northern Falls. He'd stopped measuring time in obligations and started measuring it in moments. The catch of her breath when she finally landed a decent strike during their sparring sessions, the way she threw her head back when she laughed, the comfortable silence that stretched between them on long walks through Clearwater's forests. You're too stiff. Brenda circled him in the clearing they'd claimed as their training ground, wooden practice sword loose in her grip. Stop thinking like you're in a throne room. Roderick's hands tightened on his own blade. She didn't know how close to truth she'd just struck. I'm thinking like someone who doesn't want his ribs broken. Then move. She lunged fast enough that his wolf surged in approval. He blocked, but barely. Better again. They'd fallen into this rhythm months ago, him teaching her defensive techniques he claimed to have learned from traveling warriors, her soaking up every lesson with fierce determination. She was good. Quick learner, unafraid of pain, willing to fail until she succeeded. It terrified him how much he loved watching her grow stronger. Where did you really learn this? Brenda asked between strikes, her blade whistling past his shoulder. And don't say from wandering. Nobody wanders into this kind of skill. Roderick deflected, spun, caught her blade against his. Their faces were inches apart, both breathing hard. My father insisted all his sons learn to fight. Truth wrapped in omission. His sons, Brenda's eyes searched his face. How many brothers do you have? Had 2 there, gone now. Also true, 1 to fever. 1 to a border skirmish 3 years past. The grief still lived in Roderick's chest, a constant weight. Brenda's expression softened. She lowered her sword. I'm sorry. It was a long time ago. doesn't make it hurt less. She touched his arm, just her fingers against his forearm, and the warmth that sparked between them had nothing to do with exertion. His wolf rumbled, content. Mine. Not yet. Maybe never if she discovered what he'd hidden from her. Roderick stepped back, breaking contact before he did something stupid like pull her closer. Again, your left side drops when you're tired. Brenda rolled her eyes but raised her blade. Slave driver. They trained until the sun peaked overhead, then collapsed in the meadow grass while Brenda caught her breath. She'd brought lunch. She always brought lunch now, her excuses about excess food long since abandoned. They both knew the truth. She wanted to be here with him, just as he ached to be near her. The mating ceremony is in 3 weeks, Brenda said quietly, staring up at the clouds. Roderick's entire body went rigid. They'd been dancing around this topic for months, both pretending the approaching date didn't exist. You don't have to attend. My mother would disown me, Brenda laughed, but it sounded hollow. Besides, all unmated wolves of age are required. You know that. You've told me enough about pack law to write a treatise. He had, too much, probably. But teaching her Iron Fang's legal structures had felt safe. Abstract knowledge, nothing that would reveal his identity. And she'd been genuinely interested, asking questions that made him reconsider assumptions he'd held since childhood. Pack law also says bonds can be rejected, Roderick pointed out. In theory, Brenda turned her head to look at him. In practice, rejecting an alpha's choice is political suicide, and Alpha Thorn, she trailed off, something dark flickering across her face. What about him? He's been watching me lately, at gatherings, in the market, she swallowed hard. My friends say I should be honored, that he's powerful, wealthy, could give me everything. Roderick's wolf snarled, territorial rage flooding his veins so fast he had to clench his fists to keep from shifting. And what do you say? I say they don't see the way he looks at the servants, like they're possessions, tools. Brenda's voice dropped to barely a whisper. I say I've seen this before in females who perform devotion, and I won't become that. The mate bond between them pulsed, still forming but undeniable. Roderick felt it in his chest. A warmth, a rightness, a pull toward this woman who saw the world with the same clarity that had driven him from his own throne. Brenda, her name tasted like hope and terror. If you could choose anyone. I already have. She sat up abruptly, grass clinging to her hair, eyes bright with something that looked like desperation. God help me, Roderick, I've already chosen. You must feel it too. This, whatever this is between us. His heart stuttered. I feel it. Then what do we do? Her voice cracked. You're a drifter with nothing. I'm from a family that expects me to secure advantage through bonding. Even if I reject Thorn, even if no one chooses me, my mother will arrange something. Someone appropriate. Someone who isn't. Isn't what? Poor, rootless. Bitterness leaked into his words. Isn't you? Brenda grabbed his hand, her fingers threading through his. Don't you understand? I don't care about wealth or status or any of it. I care about the wolf who teaches me to fight and quotes pack law like poetry, who listens when I talk and makes me laugh and feels like home. The bond flared between them, recognizing truth. Roderick pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. 3 weeks. They had 3 weeks before everything shattered. We'll figure it out, he lied, because the truth, that he was a prince with duties calling him home, that his time here was stolen, that loving her might destroy them both, would break her. She deserved better than his half-truths. She deserved everything. And he was going to lose her. Chapter 4, The Rejection. The bonfire devoured the night sky, sparks spiraling upward like desperate prayers. Brenda stood at the ceremony's edge, half hidden behind the ancient oak that marked Clearwater's gathering ground. Her mother had insisted she wear the silk dress, the one that clung and shimmered and screamed available. Every unmated female wore similar armor tonight, painted and perfumed, and displayed like merchandise at market. Brenda's stomach churned. Across the flames, she caught glimpses of Roderick and the crowd of observers, common wolves, mated pairs, those who'd come to witness but not participate. He'd positioned himself where she could see him, and even from this distance, she felt the pull. The invisible thread that had been weaving itself tighter between them for 10 months, until breathing without him nearby felt incomplete. "The Alpha approaches," someone whispered, and the crowd's murmur shifted to anticipation. Alpha Thorn emerged from the ceremonial lodge, firelight carving his features into something predatory. He was handsome in the way a blade was handsome, all sharp edges and lethal purpose. Power rolled off him in waves, ancient and undeniable. Brenda pressed deeper into the oak's shadow. The ritual began as it always did. The pack elder called forth the unmated males first, each one stepping into the fire's circle to present themselves for consideration. Young warriors, crafters, hunters, all hopping tonight would end their solitude. Then Thorn moved. The crowd parted automatically, deference and fear creating a wide path. He didn't look at any of the other females preening in their finery. His gaze locked onto Brenda's hiding spot with predator's precision. "No," she breathed. "Brenda, daughter of Marcus." Thorn's voice carried across the clearing, rich with authority. "Step forward." Her mother's hand clamped onto her wrist, nails digging deep. "Go, now, smile." Brenda's legs moved through force of habit, years of obedience warring with the wrongness screaming through her veins. She emerged into the firelight, and the crowd's gasp rippled outward like a stone thrown into still water. The Alpha was choosing, personally, publicly. It was the highest honor Clearwater could bestow. Thorn's smile promised possession. "You've caught my attention, Brenda, your spirit, your fire. These are qualities befitting an Alpha's mate." He extended his hand, the claiming gesture unmistakable. "I choose you." The bond attempt slammed into her chest, his will trying to force connection, to override choice with sheer dominance. It felt like claws scraping against her soul, trying to dig in, to take root where only one other had planted seeds. The forming bond with Roderick blazed in response, protective and fierce. Not him, never him, wrong, wrong, wrong. Brenda looked at Thorn's outstretched hand, at his smile that didn't reach his cold eyes, at the way he stood like he'd already won, like her acceptance was inevitable, because who would dare refuse an Alpha? She thought about the servant girl she'd seen him berate until she wept, all because his dinner was lukewarm. The way he'd casually mentioned culling the weak from the pack, as if wolves were livestock to be managed. The rumors that whispered through Clearwater about his first mate, the one who died under mysterious circumstances after bearing him no heirs. She thought about Roderick, his gentleness, his strength that never needed to prove itself through cruelty. The way he listened like her words mattered, like she mattered beyond her bloodline or her body or what advantage she could provide. The mate bond pulsed between them, fragile but real, built on choice, on truth. Brenda straightened her spine and met the Alpha's gaze directly. "I reject this bond." Silence crashed over the gathering like a physical blow. Thorn's hand remained extended, frozen in disbelief. "What did you say?" "I said no." Her voice didn't shake. The bond with Roderick burned steady in her chest, giving her courage. "I reject your claim, Alpha Thorn. I will not be your mate." The crowd erupted. Gasps, whispers, her mother's strangled sound of horror. But Brenda kept her eyes on Thorn, watching his expression shift from shock to humiliation to something dark and dangerous. "You dare," he started. "Pack law grants me the right of refusal." Brenda quoted the words Roderick had taught her months ago, lessons that had seemed theoretical then. "No bond can be forced. No wolf can be claimed against their will. You taught us this yourself, Alpha." Thorn's jaw clenched so hard she heard his teeth grind. Around them, the pack watched with horrified fascination, a butterfly defying a wolf, and everyone knew how this story ended. But Brenda had stopped caring about appropriate endings. "This isn't over," Thorn said softly, each word dripping venom. Then he turned and stalked from the circle, his exit scattering wolves like leaves before a storm. Brenda's mother descended on her the moment they reached home, fury making her beautiful face ugly. "Have you lost your mind?" She paced the sitting room like a caged animal. The alpha, he chose you, and you humiliated him in front of the entire pack. He didn't choose me, Mother. He chose a possession. Brenda stood her ground, still wearing the silk dress that suddenly felt like a costume. I won't be that. You'll be nothing, worse than nothing. Who will want you now? What male will risk the alpha's displeasure by courting his reject? I don't care. You don't. Her mother stopped packing, studied her daughter with narrowed eyes. This is about that drifter, that poor, worthless stranger you've been sneaking around with. Heat flooded Brenda's cheeks, but she didn't deny it. His name is Roderick, and he's worth more than a dozen thorns. He has nothing. He has integrity, kindness. He sees me as more than a womb to carry heirs or a prize to display. Brenda's hand pressed against her chest, where the mate bond hummed its truth. I love him, Mother, and he loves me. That matters more than status. Her mother's face crumpled. Oh, my foolish girl, love doesn't keep you safe. Power does, wealth does. Then I'll be unsafe and poor. Brenda moved toward the stairs. But I'll be mine. She locked herself in her room before the tears could fall, pressing her palm against the window glass. Somewhere out there, Roderick was feeling this too. The bond singing with her choice, with her defiance, with the terrifying freedom of choosing love over security. Worth it, she thought. Whatever came next, he was worth it. Chapter 5, Flight Through the Forest. Brenda's mother appeared at Roderick's cottage before dawn, her face pale as death. They're coming. She gripped the doorframe, chest heaving like she'd run the entire way. Thorne knows about you and Brenda. He's sending guards to arrest you for, she choked on the words, for corrupting an unmated female, for undermining his authority. Roderick's blood turned to ice. When? Now, minutes maybe. I delayed them as long as I could, told them I needed to confront you myself first, but her voice cracked. You have to run, both of you. She thrust a pack at him. Food, water skins, a knife that looked expensive and well-balanced. Supplies gathered by a mother who'd finally understood what her daughter had been trying to say about love mattering more than status. Brenda, Roderick demanded. Waiting at the forest edge, North Path. Her mother's eyes filled with tears. Keep her safe, please. That monster will kill you and drag her back to force the bond, and I can't, she broke off, pressing a hand to her mouth. Roderick pulled on his pack, grabbed the few possessions that mattered. Thank you. Don't thank me, just run. She caught his arm as he passed. She loves you, really loves you. I see it now. Whatever happens, know that I finally understand. He ran. Brenda materialized from the pre-dawn shadows, her own pack secure across her shoulders, fear and determination warring in her expression. The mate bond flared between them, sharp with urgency. North, Roderick said, fast as we can. They shifted mid-stride, clothes and packs shredding as fur rippled across skin, bones reshaping, wolves emerging in a burst of primal power. Brenda's wolf was smaller than his but lithe, built for speed and endurance. She kept pace easily as they plunged into the forest, leaving Clearwater behind in a blur of pine and desperate hope. Behind them, shouts erupted. Thorne's guards had reached the cottage. Roderick pushed harder, and Brenda matched him stride for stride. They ran as the sun climbed, painting the canopy gold. Ran as it peaked overhead, heat making their tongues loll. Ran as it descended toward evening, shadows stretching long and hungry across their path. The trackers followed like death itself, persistent, patient, closing the distance whenever Roderick and Brenda slowed. Can't stop, he managed during a brief pause at a stream, both of them lapping water desperately. His human voice sounded strange after hours in wolf form. They'll catch us. Brenda shifted beside him, ribs heaving, hair plastered to her face with sweat. How far to the border? Another day, maybe more. He met her eyes. I'm sorry, I never meant for this to. Don't. She touched his face, and even exhausted, even terrified, the bond between them pulsed warm and steady. I chose this. I'd choose it again. A howl split the air behind them. Close, too close. They shifted and ran. Night fell like a curtain, forcing them to slow or risk breaking legs on unseen roots. Roderick found a hollow beneath a massive oak, its roots creating a cave just large enough for 2 wolves. They crawled inside, pressed together from nose to tail, hearts hammering against each other. The bond crystallized another degree, solidifying in the dark. Brenda's wolf whined softly, and Roderick's answered with a protective rumble. He could feel her exhaustion, her fear, but also her absolute trust. She'd followed him into the unknown, risking everything, because the mate bond told her he was worth it. He'd die before he let Thorn touch her. Dawn came too soon and not soon enough. They emerged stiff and aching, and Roderick caught the scent of rabbit. They hunted together without planning it, him driving the prey toward her, her speed and precision making the kill. They ate quickly, tearing meat with desperate hunger, and something shifted. This was what mates did. Hunted, protected, survived together. The bond, Brenda whispered when they paused at midday, human again just long enough to drink and assess their direction. I can feel you, your determination, your fear for me. I feel you too. Roderick pressed his forehead to hers. Your courage, your trust, it's terrifying, she finished, and perfect. The tracker's howls echoed through the trees, spurring them back into motion. The second night, they didn't bother with shelter, just collapsed against each other in a thicket, too exhausted for fear. Brenda's wolf curled into Roderick's larger frame, her nose tucked beneath his chin, and he wrapped around her like a shield. The mate bond settled deeper, roots finding purchase in both their souls. When dawn broke on the 3rd day, Roderick scented the change before he saw it. Different trees, different undergrowth, the subtle shift in air that marked territorial boundaries. Iron Fang land. Relief and terror warred in his chest. Safety, but also truth. Once they crossed this border, once they reached the palace, Brenda would discover everything he'd hidden from her. She'd learned that the poor drifter she'd fallen in love with was actually a prince. That he'd lied about who he was for almost a year. That the bond between them had been built on a foundation of half-truths and omissions. What's wrong? Brenda asked, sensing his hesitation through the bond. Behind them, the trackers crashed through the underbrush, close enough now that Roderick could hear individual paws striking earth. Nothing, he lied one last time. Come on, we're almost safe. They crossed into Iron Fang territory at a dead run, and Roderick felt the guards' presence before he saw them, his father's warriors patrolling the border. They'd recognize him instantly, even in wolf form. The truth was seconds away from destroying everything. But at least she'd be safe. He'd trade her hatred for her survival, without hesitation. The guards emerged from the trees, and Roderick shifted, raising his hands in the royal gesture of command. Behind him, he heard Brenda's sharp intake of breath as the warriors immediately dropped to one knee. Your Highness, they said in unison, welcome home. Chapter 6, Palace of Secrets. The Iron Fang Palace rose from the mountainside like a crown of stone and ambition. Brenda stood frozen at the forest's edge, still in wolf form, her mind struggling to reconcile the crumbling cottage with this monument to power. Towers pierced the sky. Walls thick as ancient trees enclosed courtyards she could see even from this distance. Banners snapped in the wind, bearing a sigil she'd seen before, carved into the knife Roderick used for hunting, etched subtly into the practiced sword he'd claimed was a gift from his father. His father, the king. The guards had brought horses, and Roderick, Prince Roderick, mounted with the easy grace of someone born to saddles and ceremony. He looked back at her, still wolf-shaped and trembling, his expression raw with something that might have been regret or fear or desperate hope. Brenda, he said quietly, please. She shifted because refusing would be childish, and she'd left childhood behind when she rejected an alpha in front of her entire pack. But she couldn't look at him. Couldn't process the enormity of his deception while her body still ached from 2 days of running, and her heart still pulsed with the mate bond that insisted he was hers, prince or pauper or liar. They rode in silence, broken only by hoofbeats and her world shattering. The palace swallowed them whole. Servants appeared like conjured spirits, bowing and murmuring, "Your Highness," and "Welcome home, Prince Roderick." Each word was a knife between Brenda's ribs. Each reverent gesture a reminder that she'd been sleeping with royalty while thinking he was nobody. That everything she'd thought she knew was fiction. A woman with kind eyes and silver-threaded hair appeared, introducing herself as the head housekeeper. "We've prepared the guest chambers, Your Highness, for the young lady." "Thank you, Mara." Roderick's voice was prince-formal now, all the rough edges she'd loved polished away. "Please ensure she has everything she needs." Brenda followed Mara through corridors that could have swallowed Clearwater's entire market square. The guest chambers were larger than her family's home, furnished with luxury that made her silk ceremony dress look like peasant rags. "His Highness will join you shortly," Mara said gently. "Would you like a bath drawn, fresh clothes?" Brenda nodded mutely, and when Mara left, she sank onto the massive bed and finally let herself feel it. The betrayal, the confusion, the fury that he'd let her fall in love with a ghost. The door opened an hour later. She'd bathed, dressed in the fine clothes provided, and was standing at the window watching the sun set over mountains she'd never seen before. "Brenda," Roderick's voice was rough, stripped of royal polish. "Let me explain. You're a prince." She didn't turn around. "You've been a prince this entire time, and you let me believe you were a worthless drifter." "Yes." "You lied about everything." "Not everything." He moved closer but didn't touch her. "My brothers are dead. My father did insist we learn to fight. I did leave because I couldn't stand the fake bonds anymore. All of that was true." "And the rest?" She finally faced him, saw the anguish carved into every line of his body. "Who are you really, Roderick? Because I don't think I ever met him." He flinched like she'd struck him. "You met the truest version of me that's ever existed." His voice broke. "You met the wolf underneath the crown, the one who wanted to be chosen for himself, not for power or politics or advantage. So you decided to trick me instead." Anger burned through her exhaustion. "To play pretend while I fell in love with someone who didn't exist." "You fell in love with me." Roderick closed the distance between them, desperation making him bold. "The wolf who taught you to fight, who listened to you talk about everything and nothing, who couldn't breathe right when you weren't near. That was real, Brenda. Everything between us was real." The mate bond pulsed in her chest, agreeing with him even as her mind screamed betrayal. "You still lied," she whispered. "I know." He reached for her hand, and she let him take it because the bond demanded contact, needed the reassurance of touch. "I'm sorry. I was desperate and selfish, and I convinced myself that lying was better than losing you to the same performance I'd endured in 100 females before. I'm not them. I know that now. I think I knew it after the first week." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "But by then, I was already falling, and I was terrified that the truth would destroy what we were building." Brenda wanted to hate him, wanted to rage and reject and run back to Clearwater despite Thorne's fury. But the bond hummed between them, and she could feel his truth. The bone-deep fear, the desperate love, the absolute certainty that she was his mate in every way that mattered. "I need time," she said finally. Roderick nodded, released her hand even though it clearly cost him. "Take all you need." He was at the door when she spoke again. "For what it's worth, I fell in love with you too. The real you, underneath whatever name you were using. I just wish you'd trusted me enough to tell me." His shoulders sagged with relief and grief in equal measure. "So do I." The next morning, King Aldrich summoned her to breakfast. He was older than Roderick, weathered by years of rule, but his eyes held the same kindness she'd fallen for in his son. "My son loves you," he said without preamble. "Genuinely, I haven't seen him this alive in years." "Your son lied to me." "He did." Aldrich didn't defend it. "And he'll spend the rest of his life making amends if you let him. But first, you need to understand our reality. The council must approve any mate Roderick chooses. Some will welcome you. Others will see you as an outsider, a threat to tradition." "I'm not trying to threaten anything." "I know," he smiled. "But you rejected an alpha publicly, fled with a prince. That kind of courage is either admirable or dangerous, depending on who's judging. Fear coiled in her stomach, and if they don't approve? Aldrich's expression turned grim. Then my son faces an impossible choice between duty and love. Chapter 7. The Luna's Crown. The council chamber smelled of old wood and older judgments. Brenda stood at its center, 12 pairs of eyes dissecting her from elevated seats arranged in a semicircle. Roderick waited outside. This trial was hers alone. The mate bond stretched between them like a tether, his anxiety bleeding through despite the stone walls separating them. She straightened her spine and met their scrutiny without flinching. "Tell us," Counselor Merrick began, his voice dripping skepticism, "why we should accept a wolf from Clearwater who knows nothing of our ways." "I don't claim to know everything about Iron Fang," Brenda said evenly. "But I've spent 3 days learning your laws, your customs, your history, not to deceive you, but to understand what it means to serve this pack." 3 days, Merrick's laugh was sharp. "Our princes study for years." "Then test me." She locked eyes with him. "Ask your questions, judge my understanding, not my origin." A female counselor leaned forward, silver hair gleaming in torchlight. "Very well. A lower-ranked wolf is accused of stealing food from the storehouse. The evidence is clear, but his family is starving because injury prevented him from hunting. What justice do you recommend?" Brenda's mind raced through the laws Roderick had taught her. But more than that, she thought about the servant girls she'd defended in Clearwater, about the cruelty she'd seen disguised as propriety. "The law demands restitution," she said carefully. "But justice demands we ask why a pack member's family is starving in the first place. If injury prevents hunting, the pack should provide until he heals. That's what pack means." She paused. "I'd require restitution, yes, but I'd also investigate why our systems failed to catch his need before desperation drove him to theft." Silence stretched, then the female counselor nodded slowly. "Continue." They bombarded her with scenarios for an hour. A border dispute with a neighboring pack, a challenge to the alpha's authority from within, a mate bond forming between wolves of vastly different ranks. Each question designed to expose weakness, ignorance, or the wrong kind of ambition. Brenda answered from the heart, filtering every response through the simple principle that had guided her since childhood. Wolves deserved dignity, regardless of rank or wealth or circumstance. "You speak of compassion," Merrick challenged, "but compassion without strength is weakness. How do you lead when mercy conflicts with security?" "Mercy doesn't conflict with security." Brenda's voice sharpened. "Fear-based leadership creates enemies within your own borders. Wolves who feel valued fight harder to protect their pack than wolves who fear punishment for every misstep." Pretty words from someone who's never led anything. "You're right, I haven't led, but I've watched leaders." She thought of Thorn, of his cruelty masked as strength. "I've seen what happens when power becomes its own justification. It rots from within, creating subjects instead of pack." She met each council member's gaze in turn. "I'd rather build something real that lasts than something fearsome that crumbles the moment the alpha shows weakness." The hostile counselors shifted uncomfortably. The sympathetic ones looked intrigued. "One final question," the female counselor said. "Why did you reject your alpha to run with a stranger?" Brenda's hand pressed against her chest where the mate bond pulsed. "Because I'd rather have truth with nothing than lies with everything. Because Roderick saw me, not what I could give him. Because love built on choice is stronger than bonds built on obligation." Her voice softened. "And because my wolf knew before my mind did, he's my mate, really mine, and I'm not ashamed of choosing him." The council members exchanged glances, silent communication passing between them. Then, one by one, they nodded. "The outsider has proven herself," the female counselor announced. "Let the pack decide if they'll accept her." The great hall filled at sunset, wolves packed shoulder to witness their prince's bonding ceremony. Brenda stood beside Roderick at the dais, her mother in the front row with tears streaming down her face, shock and joy warring in her expression when she'd arrived that morning to discover her daughter was bonding with a prince. "I don't understand," her mother had whispered. How did you, when did? I fell in love with a stranger, Mother, Brenda had said, and he turned out to be everything I needed. Now King Aldrich raised his hand for silence. My son chose his mate not from obligation, but from his heart. She has proven herself before the council, but Aluna serves the pack, not just the prince. Will you accept her? The question hung in torchlit air. Then someone in the crowd, a servant, Brenda realized with shock, called out, "She spoke of dignity for all wolves. I accept her." Another voice joined, then another. The chant built like thunder. We accept, we accept, we accept. Tears burned Brenda's eyes. Roderick's hand found hers, squeezing tight. The bonding ritual was ancient and beautiful. They cut their palms, pressed bleeding hands together while the pack witnessed the mate bond's final solidification. It flared between them like lightning finding ground, every partial connection forged over months of trust suddenly complete. Brenda gasped as she felt everything, Roderick's fierce love, his relief, his absolute certainty that she was his perfect match. And through the bond, he felt her forgiveness, her understanding, her commitment to building something real together. My Luna, Roderick whispered against her temple as the pack erupted in celebration. My prince, she answered, then with a smile that held all their shared secrets. My Roderick. They'd both been searching for the same thing, a bond without performance, love without pretense, someone who chose them freely. And they'd found it in a cottage at the world's edge, built it through honesty and survival, proven it before councils and crowds. The future Alpha King held his Luna close while their pack celebrated, and for the first time in his life, Roderick wore his crown without feeling its weight. Because she saw past it. She always had.